This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. All right. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. You're on I think that's about 2 feet by 4 foot screen, and it's a joy to see you.
So we're all coming in clear and in full color, right?
Yes, you are. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Ed, I'll go once around and we'll do introductions from our side, and then I'll turn it over to the city manager to do just a quick chat and then have you take the lead, okay, after that? Okay.
Perfect.
All right, Ann McInerney-Ogle, Mayor for the city.
Linda Glover, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for being here and welcome.
I'm James Hackleman, the Vancouver Police Chief.
Jeff Morgan, Assistant Police Chief.
Ty Stover, City Council.
And Eric Holmes, and I have the honor of being Vancouver City Manager. Wanted to first and foremost thank everyone for taking the time out of your lives to share some perspective and engage with the leadership of the city and community leadership on the issue of systemic inequality and racial justice in Vancouver. I do want to note before kind of going any further, you probably heard it already, but at the request from folks from LULAC, we are recording this session. And I just want to confirm that's different than what we have done with the other sessions so far. And I know some of you participated in earlier sessions. Just want to confirm that that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, I had made the request to have it recorded. So,
okay. The reason we started these sessions was a recognition as leaders within this organization and leaders within the community that systemic racism and racial injustice exists in our society. It exists in our community, and it is long gone ignored. But the events that have unfolded across the nation and really actually across the globe, but also here in Vancouver in the weeks since the murder of George Floyd, have really raised the issue and shown light on it in a way that does not allow it to continue to be ignored. And so as an initial step, we wanted to start a series of listening sessions so that we can hear directly from members of our community, and in particular from organizations like yours who carry the voice of communities of color in Vancouver, to hear your views and perspective and experience on racial justice and systemic inequities in Vancouver. And because this is a bit more of a focus session with LULAC, I think we anticipate this being a little more of a back and forth conversation, Q&A, which is a little bit different than the broad public sessions that we had that were open to the general public. So we have enjoyed and really appreciated in all the sessions so far that folks have been very open, very honest, very direct, clear, but kind and respectful, and we are grateful for that and look forward to that being a continued tenor for this conversation. Also, just want to acknowledge for all of us on the call that this is really the beginning and initial steps of the work that the city hopes to engage in, not the end of it. And so we hope that in addition to what we can learn today, that we can count on you as partners as we continue the work to improve how we serve the community and overall systemic inequities in Vancouver. So,
So Ed, take it away. It's all yours.
all righty. So I think that Mr. Holmes, that was directed at me, the kindness, because we all know I'm a little less. So council members and mayor, sheriff, police chief, and assistant police chief, thank you very much for providing us this opportunity to have a conversation that's open and honest with the players within Vancouver. My name is Ed Hamilton Rosales. I'm the current president of the League of United Latin American Citizens, local council 47013. And I wanted to start the conversation with a couple of housekeeping things. I'm sure all of you know about who LULAC is, but I just want to reinforce it with a little bit of history. So the League of United Latin American Citizens is the nation's oldest and largest Hispanic organization in the United States. Our goals have always been to advance the economic condition, educational attainment, political influence, housing, health, and civil rights of our Hispanic citizens in the United States. LULAC was founded in 1929 in Corpus Christi as a group of several community groups with a desire to stop the racial killing of Mexicans and Mexican Americans by the city police, sheriffs, and Texas Rangers. A notable member of the founding committee was Jose Tomas Canales. He was the first Mexican American to serve on the Texas State House, and he's the first member of the State House that took on the Texas Rangers to provide proof and logic to their constant murdering of Mexicans. So it's an interesting parlay to bring us right back into this. We're currently talking about how policing has caused a normal version for us, but new for everybody else, attack on the Black community and those people of color. So we're just circling back to the roots of our raising. The reason we're here to begin with is because of those acts of brutality by certain enforcement agencies. The Mayor, if you'll allow me, one of the things that I've discovered in the past several weeks of communications is that each of us have a different definition of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I would like to lay on the table our version of that so we know that we're all talking on the same language. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely.
So for us, diversity means having enough voices with perspective and lived experiences in culturally specific communities. It's the who we are. Inclusion means taking those voices and making sure that they have a seat at the table. It's what we do with who we are. And equity is taking the information, listening to those voices at the table, putting into practice the positioning of people of color in positions of power, and giving them the tools to be successful. That's the how we do it. An important aspect of this all is that equality does not mean equity. Equality denotes that everyone is at the same starting point, and equality equals quantity. It does not equal equity. With that being said, I'm going to introduce you to several of our members who are here with us today to discuss with you our concerns as we had discussed with your team. So the first member is Yesenia. Do you want to introduce yourself? Take yourself off mute. And introduce yourself.
I think I know most everyone at the meeting right now. So I'm just I'm an immigration attorney here in Vancouver. I've been volunteering with LULAC. I participate in the Clark County Volunteer Lawyers Program, also participate with the chief with the CEDA meetings. So
We lost her.
No, I think she's done speaking.
I'm sorry, the introduction was going to go to someone else.
Yeah, go right into what you were going to discuss.
Oh, okay. So I've been with LULAC and the NAACP. We did a Freedom of Information Act request. So I want to touch some topics on those that I've been reviewing on those files. Some of the things I've noticed on there so far as all the documents that I've reviewed, I'm still making my way through the document production. But some of the things I've noticed, and I saw in the PERF report, the training for elimination of bias, for ethics, for cultural competency, for mental health. I just feel like it's lacking. There in comparison, there's the training for police vehicles and training for use of firearms. that understandably it's going to be more in hours, probably, but just from seeing the certifications of some of the officers that have been involved in officer-involved shootings, for example, unreasonable force and a student to intervene, it's 0.25 hours. And I was reviewing all the certifications that an officer had. So 0.25 hours for intervening within a set number of years just doesn't seem to be enough to solidify like that. If an officer is conducting themselves inappropriately, another officer should step up to the plate and intervene. There's some so I want to produce a letter on behalf of LULAC and with working with NAACP that addresses more of our concerns regarding those FOIAs, but that's something that I've noticed is, yes, you guys are doing a lot of training, but maybe we need to incorporate training that's listens to our voices as community members. Sorry, I'm reviewing my notes here. Some other things that I wanted to touch upon is I serve an immigrant population, and the immigrant population isn't just Latinos. It's not just Black community, not just brown communities. It's a lot of people that have limited English proficiency and also a big fear of immigration. And whether or not they're in the right to be calling the police department to report a crime, I hear time and time again, I called the police department and there was no one available that could speak my language. They never offered any interpretation services. The police report, once I got it, was not accurate. They spoke to the officer that came to whatever incident that was called for, only took into consideration the English proficient person. They didn't take into consideration the non-English proficient person. They used children to do interpretation services for the parents, which it's good to get the perspective of a child, but at the same time, a child should not be interpreting for their parent. Other things I've heard is there's a fear that immigration is going to be called if the police department gets called. And I think it's imperative that the police department and the sheriff's department and the city make a campaign to show immigrants living in our community that they are also going to be protected if they make calls to the police department. They're also going to be offered services in their languages if they make a call and if they try to report a crime, and that they're going to be protected. They're not going to be reported to immigration. I think that that's a campaign that should be, it's long awaited. It should be happening. Some other things that I can have criticism for is I feel that there's a lack of consistent engagement within the CDAT and within the suggestions that our community is making to the department. One of the things that we have mentioned before is that there should be some kind of metrics to see if there's the cultural diversity, the implicit bias, the elimination of bias is actually setting into the officers, even though they're taking these trainings. Because we know that the trainings are happening, but if you sit in a room for over an hour, 2 hours, half an hour, how do we know that that information is actually being retained by the officers that are now going to serve our community? There's no way of knowing. And, you know, as an attorney, I can take exams and one of the things I did see was I didn't see a certification for this within the certifications that I saw officers had. And I think that that is a training that should have a certification. It's a way to measure whether or not the information is being retained. And it should be a continuous training, like a yearly training, as I've seen other trainings be yearly. So that would, the other thing is, and I don't know if this has been discussed or if it's been developed yet, but what is going to happen to ensure that the recommendations from the PERF and also the community discussions are going to be implemented into the coming up years, the changes in the force? How is that going to look going forward? So some other information that we would like to know is what is the consequences for an officer having high complaints? For unlawful use of force, for bias. So, and more things to discuss, but again, I'm trying to do a letter and a thorough review of the documents that were provided within the FOIA responses, to have something to offer the city and the department. So I'll let Ed lead it now to the next person who can comment.
Oh, you're good. I know that we wanted to have this more of a conversation piece. Chief, did you want to have any comments on that based on all the many questions that you had?
I'm happy to address some of them. I might not have answers to all of them. Maybe I'll go in reverse as I copy them down. So the last one I heard about accountability for officers that have complaints against them. So that one's a little bit difficult for me because we hold officers accountable when we have sustained complaints against them. Just because a member of the community files a complaint, the investigation, the intent of the investigation is to bear out whether they actually did it or didn't do it. In those instances where we do have sustained complaints against officers, we do take appropriate corrective action, whether that be counseling, additional training, combination of those to days off and termination. So maybe there's an opportunity in the future to have a little bit more conversation to that, but I'll share that. Accountability for the PERF recommendations, that's a great question. I think that came up last week in one of the other conversations, and we are doing a couple things right now within the police department. One of those is we are essentially cataloging all of the recommendations in a spreadsheet, and our intention is to, on our website, post those so that everybody has an opportunity to see just where they are at. Really with a timeline in place as to when and how we're going to address those. I like the idea, what I just heard a moment ago about measurable outcome for bias, from bias training, certification for bias training, yearly training. I'm not familiar with the certification for bias training. Typically, those training sessions that we've attended it's a class. And there's generally no test at the end. with that. That's relatively common industry-wide, that there really isn't some type of measurable outcome like you would typically see in firearms, right? You have to, earn a certain score to be qualified in firearms. So that's an interesting one for us to take a look at and see if there are programs like that out there that, are certifiable. Yearly training, I don't see it as a problem. We do annual critical incident training every year. The state requires at a minimum that every officer, might be every other year, I could have my facts wrong, but you have to attend 2 hours of critical incident training. So dealing with people that are in crisis. The lack of engagement from CDAT back into the community, if I understood that right, Yesenia. I know that you've been at the table quite a bit and you understand the dynamic of CDAT. That's been an ongoing conversation of how do we do something that is actionable back into the community. I think that through these conversations and addressing these similar concerns with the Executive Steering Committee for CDAT, we should be able to do something that is more marketable. Regarding the comments about officers responding to calls that are with citizens that are non-English speaking, we do have a program. We do have policy on utilizing interpretive services. And so I'd be interested in how that is occurring today, because we have had ongoing conversations with the community regarding this topic. I totally understand, and I've heard it before, where officers have used children present to conduct interpretation. As the police department, we recognize that that is not a best practice, and it's discouraged. We do have and pay for interpretation services, so I don't know why that would still be occurring. I like the idea, and I think that we can do something with that with city communications, as well as our public information coordinator, Kim Kapp, as it relates to doing some advertising around reducing the fear that people would be turned over to immigration if they call the police. That it's not our practice, it's not within our policy to do those things. But if we can come up with a way ahead to advertise that in the right places, I encourage us to do that. We have done some things in the past through CDAT and that type of messaging, and that one to me is something easy to accomplish. I think I covered everything. If I missed something, Yesenia, please let me know, and I'll be happy to address those.
And if I could maybe both Ed and Yesenia jump in addition to what the chief described relative to the recommendations in the PERF report. He described some of the steps that we're taking immediately to not only put information out to the community on that, but also take some action to address some of the highest priority recommendations there. One of the things I wanted to take this forum as an opportunity to do is to actually extend an invitation to LULAC to participate in a task force that we're forming. The City Council endorsed the creation of this, focused on really transparency and accountability in the implementation of the recommendations that are in the PERF report, as well as to provide some review and recommendation on establishing a body-worn camera program for the department. We're looking at bringing together multiple voices from the community, along with the chief's office, my office, the mayor, and 2 city council members in a task force format, really focused on the 84 recommendations that are in the PERF report and making sure that those are implemented in a way that is transparent to the community that we serve, as well as that there's an accountability that includes voices and perspective from outside of the city organization. So one of the things I had hoped to come away with today is who from the LULAC organization I can work with to kind of craft that participation as part of a larger group to focus on the PERF report.
You're muted, Ed.
Yep, I just realized I had put myself back on mute so I wouldn't hear, so you wouldn't hear what I was saying. It's a good idea, and I would be happy to have our organization participate. There are several people that come to mind, but I would have to not volunteer them first.
So Ed, would you be the best point of contact for me to call?
Yes. For now, yes.
Yesenia, did I miss any of your questions?
I don't. No, I think you've responded to them, and I do want to thank you guys for taking the time to also hear our comments and suggestions. I think there's still a lot more questions that other members of LULAC have, so I'll let someone else jump in at this point.
Thanks, Yesenia. Chris Canseco, you're up next. Unmute.
Hear me?
Yep.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. So first, I wanted to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to be here on this call and to give us an opportunity to speak with you on certain topics that are very important to us in our community of color. My name is Christian Canseco, and I have been a resident of the City of Vancouver for over 25 years. I am the current treasurer for Southwest Washington LULAC Council 47013. I am also involved in our community as treasurer and secretary for the Lighthouse Community Credit Union, board of directors, and as a parish council member for the St. John's the Evangelist Catholic Church. Today, in 2020, the City Council for Vancouver has zero representation from people of color, excuse me. The Clark County Council has zero representation from people of color. With the exception of one council member in Battleground, all other city councils within Clark County have zero representation from people of color. I applaud the progress the city councils have made in regard to gender representation. I also want to congratulate you, Madam Mayor, for being the first female mayor of the City of Vancouver. While these are great accomplishments within our county, people of color are still underrepresented in leadership positions. People of color are not only underrepresented in city councils, but also other leadership positions within our community, including the private and public sectors. I do not only speak about manager level roles within companies and organizations, but also the executive levels. Furthermore, I also speak about board of directors and commission seats. In addition, our educational system, not only at the teacher and staff level, but also the administration and district level. We need more representation in public sector leadership positions to better represent the diverse members of our communities they serve. Mr. Holmes, I would challenge you to think of how many people of color you currently employ in leadership positions in the City of Vancouver. I respect you may not have this information at the moment, but I would like to ask you to intentionally think about this as you continue to serve our community. It is not only important for us as a community to encourage, support, and diversify our leadership positions to better represent our community, it is also critical for us to retain people of color in these leadership roles. We must strive to rebuild the culture, environment, and systems in place today to allow for people of color to be successful in these positions, to give them a true opportunity to make an impactful difference for the future of people of color in our county. We must challenge ourselves to create a community where we value the talent, experiences, and voices of people of color when they are in these leadership positions. I am thankful our community recognizes talent is the #1 asset to drive our economy here in Clark County. In fall of 2018, WC Vancouver enrolled 37.6% minority new freshmen, an increase from the previous year of 33.9%. In fall 2019, the number of minority new freshmen jumped to 41%. Of the total students enrolled at WC Vancouver in fall 2019, 29% are minority and 43.4% are first-generation college students. Based on the 2017-2018 academic year statistics for Clark College, 76% are first-generation college students and 34% self-report as being of color. We need to take action to create an inclusive community that encourages the talent in our local higher educational system to consider our community here in Clark County as their first best option for career opportunities. I believe Clark County is a great community, so much that I personally have intentionally chosen to continue living, volunteering, and serving my community for the past decade. I also believe we need to be more inclusive of all the diversity we are so fortunate to have. I know you have heard from other communities of color on similar topics, even though we may be speaking to you at different times. I trust our messages are very similar. We, the people of color, want to be genuinely accepted and feel a sense of belonging here in our community. I ask you to work with us so we could all create a thriving community that is culturally rich, inclusive, and represented from people of color. Thank you for all that you have done, continue to do, and will do to help ensure we make Clark County a welcoming community for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christian, this is Eric. Thank you for your comments. And I'd like to, so in the next, speaking specifically about leadership in the city organization, in the next year, I will be recruiting for a new fire chief because the current fire chief intends to retire, for 2 new deputy fire chiefs because one just before the pandemic left to go to another organization and we added some capacity there. I'll also be recruiting some other kind of senior manager positions in the organization. And I'd like to be able to work with LULAC so that you can connect us through your networks to the talent that's available, not just in our community, but also elsewhere in the country, but first and foremost within our community, so that we can get those folks into the pool for these positions. In addition, the city has, I think it's 24 advisory boards and commissions that advise the city council and my office on a range of things, from running an airport to long-term land use policy to civil service for our police and fire to our urban forest canopy. Each one of those has between 5 and 11 positions on it that are up for appointment by the city council. And these are citizen governance boards that advise on critical policies and projects across the whole city. And it's another opportunity for us to get more people of color involved in decision making at the city. So I'd like to make sure that we are also connecting those opportunities with LULAC and LULAC with those opportunities so that we can get more candidates for the city council to consider as they appoint individuals to these boards and commissions.
Perfect.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I think
Mr. Holmes. I appreciate that.
Mr. Holmes, is there a list on the website for the city of Vancouver that lists all those different opportunities that are available?
We'll make sure that we send it to you as part of the follow-up. Yes, there is.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if I can ask you, Ed, I'll be giving you a follow-up call to talk about some of the task force work, but if you do get a chance to look at it, one of the things that we also want to focus on, there's a lot of work to do, but one of the things we want to focus on is not just connecting communities of color and people of color with these resources and opportunities that we have in place, but also to learn from organizations like LULAC or NAACP about how we can evolve those systems to remove barriers for people of color to participate in their government. And so it's work we need to do, but we want to make sure we're doing the right work. And so appreciate your willingness to share any observations that you have there as well. So
absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, one great opportunity is already started, and you have Diana Perez with us on that opportunity and task force about districting and all. So that's a really good opportunity for that to start. Diana Avalos, are you ready? You all know her.
Who?
Yeah, some random person you got off from the community. Yeah, you know. Good afternoon, Mayor, Chief, and City Council members. I can't quite see my screen, but I see someone else from law enforcement there. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to engage in dialogue to address our concerns as community leaders and stakeholders that represents the diversity, the rich diversity within our city. There are two things that I would like to bring to the forefront. Certainly, I'm not expecting an answer tonight, but more in terms of some reflection, in terms of perception, and two of the issues that I would like to address while I have the floor is the concerns about the processes that community perceives as how the city and other local agencies in our community go about the processes that appears and perception is very important, that prioritize, for example, the waterfront, the high-end developers, restaurants over communities such as Rose Village. And I think that some of you know where I'm going with this point, is that there was a lot of frustration and concerns when the city and CTRAN started the process of evaluating Route 39 in the Rose Village neighborhood. As some of you may know, Route 39 was a critical and crucial transportation line for residents of Vancouver, Rose Village neighborhood. As you know, Rose Village nearly has about 5,500 residents that represent a marginalized and often underserved populations. About 24% live below the poverty line, and about 50% or more spend more than a third of their income on rent. And only 17% of adults in that neighborhood have a bachelor's degree. The area is relatively diverse, with one of three residents identifying themselves as a person of color. The Rose Village neighborhood is also home to many seniors and individuals experience disability or chronic disease. And Rose Village is one of many neighborhoods in Vancouver that have and are continuing to experience a change in terms of their demographics, in terms of services and resources, in terms of accessibility to resources and support. and how police and other agencies respond within those communities and interact with its residents. Equity ensures that one of many things about equity is to ensure that there are bus lines where people need them so they can get to school or to the doctor or to work, or all of those. So I bring up this example because this is one of many examples in terms of how communities of color, our communities who live below the poverty line, our communities who have not been treated accordingly by police department are facing. The other thing that I would like to turn to, which this pandemic has made very clear, and that is equity in emergency management. As we know, Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans and many other surrounding cities, killing over about 2,000 people, give or take, displacing over more than 1 million, and causing property damage. The magnitude and destruction disproportionated effects on people of color, people low income, people with physical and mental disabilities. These groups were systematically unprepared to withstand the destruction, and their communities suffered the most loss and received the least amount of emergency support. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. The pandemic came upon us, and COVID-19 exacerbated those gaps. So a decade following Hurricane Katrina led to the theory of social justice social equity, has its roots in social justice, healthcare, and education. Planning and community development have begun to integrate these theories into the work, but progress has been confined to pockets of change by grassroots organizations such as LULAC. Okay. There is hesitancy, and I understand that there is hesitancy by emergency management and other departments across the city to address equity in their work. And they have a lack of understanding how it's linked and the clear definition of equity. And at times it's uneasy, it's very uneasy to understand how to incorporate equity into these programs, resources, support, planning. Failing to address equities has serious consequences, as we've seen with COVID. The needs of our most vulnerable people have gone unmet. And those needs of those most vulnerable people don't fit that framework of emergency management. And it has been very clear because it's been organizations like LULAC and LCRG and CCLYC and the NAACP who have stepped in to meet the unmet needs that local and state agencies were unable to fulfill for our communities of color. To fully integrate equity planning principles into all phases of emergency management, into all phases and all departments across the city, will help us all better understand the needs of the entire community and how to create programs, policies, and procedures to fulfill the needs of everyone in our community. The vision of social equity at its very best, and the very best way is to incorporate community into that decision-making process. It means policies that dismantle destructive barriers to economic inclusion and civic participation to build healthy communities and opportunities for all. That equity approach is the key to addressing structural racism and economic disparities. The example of COVID-19 and the experience of COVID-19 has exposed the racial and economic inequities already present in the city. It just exacerbated and brought it to the top. So with that, I close my comments. Oh, excuse me. No, I have one more thing to say before I close. And lastly, there's a need for benchmarks to measure all of our change, to measure the changes, not just forming advisory committees and subcommittees to engage in further conversation. But if we want real change, not only do we need to include community voice in every aspect of the process, but also benchmarks to measure those change. Because to live the words is another level. So thank you, Mayor, Chief, City Council members, and others present for your time.
Thanks, Diana. Any responses?
Well, first of all, thank you, Diana. And again, congratulations on your award. And I hope your little peanut is doing well.
Thank you, Mayor.
Have you, Ty and I serve on CTRAD. We've been following Route 39 pretty closely. Have you had individuals who have not been successful in calling for that door-to-door service?
That's a great question. Again, it is about the perception of community. And so for some community, it is a great resource. And for other members and segments of that particular neighborhood, it's very challenging because of language, not understanding the process and the system that has been set up. I think there's a need for further engagement to walk hand in hand alongside with community who understand that resource.
Okay, we'll follow up with that.
And if I could,
Thank you.
if I could keep going on the same topic a little bit, because I have been thinking about this. You laid out the demographics of Rose Village, and the natural thought would be the Route 39 would never have been on the chopping block because of the demographics of that community. It would have been a highly utilized route. It wasn't. My understanding is the dial-a-ride still is not getting a lot of usage. At the same time, we continue to see increases in the Route 4 in those stops, but there's something else keeping people from using that route. And I think part of the process we have to go through, and we had a group discussion last year, and follow-up didn't occur, needs to happen. We've got to start peeling back the onion to figure out what are truly the barriers that are keeping people to get access to accessing it in the first place. I have opinions, and my fellow council members could probably guess where I would go with opinions on what was preventing people from getting to the bus. But but rather than me have opinions, I need to continue to listen.
But I thank you for that. However, the other side to this is the process. The process the process that was taken, or the lack of process that was taken to engage every sector of that neighborhood when this decision was made. That is at the crux of it.
Okay.
And that's where I'm going back to. We need to ensure that our process is through the process of equity, the process of, are we including every sector of community in that neighborhood? The question, there's two questions. It's how the city and other agencies in this community structure their process that at times, and many times, are itself the barrier.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Diana. The next person you all know as well, Hector, you're up.
Hello. So thank you for setting up a listening session.
Hector,
am I echoing?
You're echoing. Do you have two speakers on?
No, I'll turn it down a little bit. Does that help?
Yeah. Drop the gain a little bit, it'll help.
I did lower the volume. Is that helping?
We're still picking up an echo.
Might be Ed.
Yeah, echo. Ed, could you mute yourself?
Okay, now try it, Hector.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, at this point I can. So again, thank you everyone for setting up the listening session. I think there's been a lot of great comments made so far. I have approximately 6 items. The first one it's out of order from what I had, but because Diana Avalos just mentioned it regarding bus routes, well, 39 in particular, but being an issue, I think, throughout the C-train system, is trying to find the balance of ridership, route frequency, and trying to get folks on the bus, and then how to solve problems within certain routes. So my suggestion, and I've brought it up before, is to have absolutely ask for input from riders and from the general public, but I suggest that the C-Tran board rides to their board meeting on the bus. So that way they can directly tell how long it takes to get somewhere, how effective it is to get from point A to point B, and perhaps that first-hand knowledge of what happens when you get on the bus and try to get somewhere will certainly point out the issues of what might be preventing appropriate ridership for a given route. So if you're on the bus, then you know how it works. The other thing, as far as promoting ridership, make a public statement by actually riding the bus. Make it so that individuals within city government and staff get on the bus. Call it I don't know, call it Get on the Bus program. Just everyone would be able to see our city council members on the bus, our city manager on the bus. Police officers could ride the bus as a part of the program to help protect the public. So anyway, that's the thoughts on that. So I'll go on to something else. So participation of LULAC in commissions and work groups, 100%. That sounds great. I've tried to participate as much as I could personally, and I expect that we have a lot of members that would like to be on board of on those groups. And the question is, I suggest that perhaps city officials attend our LULAC meeting and bring those suggestions and those openings directly to the membership, who may or may not have that as a priority on the radar for the things that they are doing. I think if you ask anyone on this phone call from LULAC, I think you find that many people are already on multiple boards. They're already taking participation in multiple organizations or multiple nonprofits. So I think all of us on the phone call are deeply involved with our community. And if we make that pitch to the other members who could see that they're being asked to be included in work groups and commissions, perhaps we can get them to see that they are wanted. So if, let's say, our city manager comes to our meetings when there's openings available and describes what those openings are, then our membership should be and choose to participate. So yes, ask for our opinion, but come to our meeting. Okay, so that's number 1 and 2. Okay, I've been reading over the police policy manual. Definitely not a lot there to absorb. Toward that policy, it has not been suggested. I am definitely considering this carefully, but it's not an original idea for me, but it sort of makes sense if you somehow have a licensing program, more than the certification, but actually a state license as lawyers.
Hector, hold on for just a second. Would you repeat
Sure.
that last one again, or not getting it very clearly? Did you talk about some type of licensing or certification?
Yes, a licensing of licensing. Obviously the police officers are certified, but a state license is as the state licenses teachers or lawyers or doctors, and if any of those folks have a problem, if they do something that's unethical or they make mistakes or whatever, there's penalties that could, in fact, remove their license and prevent them from practicing law or teaching or practicing medicine. So if we ask those folks to be licensed, why not another profession like police officers? You know, I think that it might alleviate some of the issues with some of the culture regarding internal affairs investigation and discipline issues. Because if those issues are problematic for a particular officer, then the state itself intervenes with removing a license. And without that license, that police officer can't move from, say, Vancouver to a sheriff's department in Haylett. So the license itself would protect the public from a person who shouldn't be a police officer. And officers are doing a great job, never have to face that particular issue. But how can we better control for the folks that just don't seem to get how to be a police officer? Okay. Kind of covers my thoughts on police, other than as Yesenia is doing, continue to review the FOIA information that we've received. I think Yesenia has gone through it quite a bit more than I have by a long shot, but there's definitely a lot to absorb from that information. I haven't really formulated many questions regarding it, as there's still a lot more to read over and certainly to review. So I'll have more comments on that in the next few weeks. The final item I have has to do with city policy, not police policy. So I don't know if Mr. Holmes remembers, but and I don't bring it up because of that, but just the fact of other issues that have happened here recently. Towing vehicle fees. I'd say many times it's a question of folks that can't move a vehicle, can't afford to move a vehicle, are caught between a rock and a hard place, and they're not able to keep their registration current. Sometimes they can't keep their vehicle running. In the case of homeless folks, they're living out of their vehicle. So if a vehicle is towed, first is the towing fee, then the storage fee, and I think there's an administrative fee. So if your vehicle gets towed, even if you get it the next day, you're facing something along almost $300 for having your car impounded. So that person who is struggling financially is hardly able to afford being able to, getting it out of impound. And then, of course, faces the rest of it that got him there in the first place, repairing the vehicle or registration of the vehicle or whatever needs to be done. So storage fees for a vehicle in impound is $75 a day. Do the math. It's pretty easy. If somebody can't pick up their vehicle for 10 days, that's $750 just in storage fees, plus all the other fees that go along with it. So how is a homeless person going to recover that vehicle? So typically a storage unit will keep a vehicle, store it for you for $75 a month. You do have to have insurance on the vehicle. You also have to have it currently registered. So that option is really not as available as it would seem, because paying $75 to store your vehicle in a storage unit sounds like a pretty good deal, $75 a month. But being able to put it in storage is problematic in itself. Anyway, those are my comments. In total, I was writing things down as other folks covered. But be glad to ask any questions if anyone does have any. And I will certainly be happy to serve time being available to serve on commissions or other things within the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hector. Chief, do we have anything do any states have something like a license for law enforcement?
So we do have a certification that can be revoked under certain conditions. So essentially, police officers in the state of Washington can be decertified. I had written a note down, as you might already be aware, that we're adding information to our website on frequently asked questions, and this is one that I'll ensure that we get posted that gives what the Criminal Justice Training Center has as requirements to be certified and what could lead to decertification. I know similar questions have come up in other meetings about officers just being able to transfer from one police department to another police department, being a problem at one police department, and that being unknown to the newer agency. That might occur in some states, but we have a very robust background process that our background investigators will go and review the personnel file to include the internal affairs investigations file for anybody that is looking to transfer to the Vancouver Police Department. Oftentimes that national narrative gets localized to where you live here in Vancouver. I would suggest that there are states and locations that don't have the same level of evaluation that occurs in the state of Washington and here in the city of Vancouver.
So we've had some laterals from Washington, D.C. and from Florida recently. So our background investigation takes a look at those personnel files back in D.C. and Florida before we put them in a tract for hiring here.
Yeah, absolutely. Our backgrounds investigators will travel to where that other person is applying from and meet with people at that agency and review their files.
Wow, okay. Okay. City policy on towing. So Hector, you and I know very well how expensive it is when an individual's home gets towed for a short amount of time. Do we have some strategies?
So we don't currently, but I do think that this is a very relevant and appropriate example of unintended consequences of some parts of our municipal code, where they were designed, frankly, to address long-term parking in neighborhoods. And they are applied uniformly across the city as opposed to equitably across the city. And so it's an example of one of those systemic changes that we could look at making.
So the underlying problem is not the towing.
It's homelessness.
Well, it's homelessness. It's the ability to maintain a vehicle.
Right.
So I'm guessing if we tried to use general fund dollars to create a program that would help address people who couldn't get their vehicle to run, I'm guessing we would run into gifting of public funds.
That's a great question. There might be a way to do it.
Well, I'm also wondering if the answer isn't also, we've talked about, there's been some general conversations about CDBG,
right,
and how we apply CDBG. And I would think maybe that
So
don't have those things. They're not bound by that constitutional prohibition.
And the prohibition, there's an exception to that prohibition. That is, the language is if you are using it to assist the poor and infirm. That's the exception language.
Okay.
And clearly that would be the case.
Okay.
Here.
Okay.
It's really to make sure you don't give money away to big corporations.
Okay.
Okay, Hector, so we'll add that to our list of suggestions and ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Thanks, Hector. Next up, we've got Pat Cano. Pat, you're on. Unmute.
We can't hear you, Pat.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello? Oh, I did the opposite. Okay, sorry. Good evening, everybody. My name is Pat Cano, and I am the Washington State Deputy Director for the Elderly of LULAC. I'm also one of the founding members of Southwest Washington LULAC. There's just two particular areas. One is definitely about our elderly in our community and in our other communities, not just Clark, but our surrounding counties. I am on the advisory council, which we volunteer. We represent older adults and adults with disabilities. You're probably aware of it. The area Agency on Aging and Disabilities has been around for a while, and our mission again is to promote independence for elders' choice, well-being, and dignity of our older adults, and to give the family caregivers in the 5 counties that we serve a comprehensive program. Well, this is I'm just saying, yes, we are reaching out, but my biggest concern, this is the second year that I've been on this 3-year term as a volunteer for the advisory council, because we advise our area agency. My biggest concern is that I am the only person of color. There are 5 of us from Clark County. We have Cowlitz, Wacayam, Skamania, and Klickitat. when I am at the advisory, we talk about our mission. And again, the mission I just said was to promote independence, choice, well-being, and dignity of our older adults. I have a real difficult time in trying to first address where are our elders, our Latino elders. That has been an issue for me because, for example, we had a needs assessment that they compile, looking at what your needs are based on some. And I said, okay, I need some in Espanol. They were very well done. But going out and reaching out to the families, it was difficult to find them. For example, they weren't at the Meals on Wheels place, that's for sure. I mean, I got plenty there in English, but that really was a red flag for me. So where are our elders? Well, then I had to think of the cultural, they're probably at home. They're probably with their familias. Or there are other places that we don't see them because they're scattered. Or that has been one thing that when I wanted to be part of the volunteer, that I would have some outreach. And that has been difficult for me, and I voiced it with our group. And so I want to reach out to all of you. We do have openings. We have openings in Cowlitz. If you know someone that would be interested in stepping up, being an advisor, being a volunteer in advisory councils, Skamania, Klickitat, because I know we have families that live out there. I mean, Skamania has said, yes, there's a pocket of people, but we've sent press releases. So if you happen to know someone, or if you can get the word out, we have openings in Skamania and Klickitat. And they can contact me, Pat Cano, and my number is 360-910-3696. And again, that's my biggest, our lack of visibility. Again, many issues, many of them could be documentation. I'm not even sure. It's unclear, but I know they go undetected, and I know the numbers are there. I don't want to wait for the census to show up so we can see the pockets of where families are. But again, they're being underserved. They're even more invisible now given the COVID-19. I mean, we have a big shortfall on Meals on Wheels and serving other families, and a number of programs like respite care and elder care, because there are many agencies that this particular agency helps with are not being served, or like I mentioned, they're just impacted by this. So that's one thing. If you know someone, you have my number, I'd be more than glad to talk to them. I'm particularly looking for people of color, Latinos. Like I said, I am the only one on this board. And I always have to give a shout out because it's important that they know it's not just the elderly, it's the family unit. And so I let them know what DACA is. I let them know what we're looking forward to. And yes, they have grandparents, they have elders in those homes. Again, that typically you would not hear about them, but they are impacted. The second thing is, I've been fortunate to be a substitute teacher at the Evergreen School District this will be my 6th year as a certified bilingual teacher. Of course, there's only 2 of us in the whole school district in Evergreen. So obviously, I go to the bilingual schools, the dual immersion. And I've had the opportunity to be with children. This is primarily in the elementary. I've done some middle school and some high school, but my expertise are in elementary, early childhood. And I get to meet the parents. It's building that trust. The kids know the staff. And we do these are dedicated people that work there. And we have, family night. They ask parents, Latino parents, with resources. They've even done, what are your needs? What would you like us to, how can we have the community come out and share information with you? And one of them, of course, was we want to know how we can participate or what the laws are here. Many of the families are new. So they want to know, what is the law? What do we do? What do I tell my children? Some of these kids are just getting their license for the first time. I've known them maybe in 3rd, 4th grade, and now, hey, they're in high school or getting real close. And I had one particular instance with one parent this last weekend. As her child came in, not her child, well, her child, he's graduating, and he had a red bandana because he forgot to bring his mask to work. So he stopped, got a red bandana, and she said, "What are you doing with that red bandana? I told you not to ride your bike with a red bandana or a blue one." And I'm like, so I explained, where are you getting your information? She goes, "No, I went to an information center. Information night, parent night, I believe at the high school, or I'm not sure. But what the information was, she took from that was this: that if her child was carrying a red bandana or a blue one, he could be stopped. That it wasn't good. Obviously, this is the information she was able to extrapolate from that one particular thing. So I think what I want to say, as we look at presenting information, I know we have important program goals in the schools when it comes to our police officers. They've done a bang-up job. I've seen it officer friendly, reaching out to kids, and it's been wonderful building that relationship. But parents are going away sometime with these information sessions with what they think they hear, or the information, whatever the goal is not always what's conveyed. If there's a translator, or I don't know where this bandana came with, I don't know what the goals are, but the parent felt like that was the alarm that went off. So for her, my thing to you is, when you do your outreach, if there's parent information night and the schools, it's part of the educational stay safe, that we look at who is our audience, what are we conveying, and if they have questions, make that information important. Maybe it was something she has. I'm not sure. All I know is that red bandana, poor thing, I thought she was going to have a heart attack. And so that was just a take. I wouldn't even thought about it, but I know what all that means. I do. I grew up knowing what colors were, what gang banging was, what the profiling is. And I think that was her big concern, that now that you're leaving my house. You leave my house now. You're going to school. You're going to work, mijo. It's that same thing, that fear that a mother has. When my child leaves his house, and is he going to be safe? The same thing we see on TV. So this really brought it home to me with just a simple bandana. But there you go. And he kind of said, "What? What's the?" Again, I think there are a number of us that work in the schools. We volunteer too, but if you do have a manual, the police department that does information parent night, and you do some translating, or you have somebody, let's make sure we're clarifying whatever it is. I know she got that information. I'm not sure what school, and that we are also getting a response from the parents. Was this helpful? What part was what? Which do we need to clarify, so we could look at what are our goals as we go along, especially now that we're hearing all this. There are a lot of mamas, a lot of daddies that are scared for their babies. I hear it all the time. And that's just my take. And thank you for your time. Thank you for the work you do. And again, we're all in this together, I guess, because everybody's saying that. But you have my number. My name is Pat Cano, 360-910-3696. I'm on the membership with AA, with the AAA of Southwest, on the membership committee, trying to get as many family of people of color on our board. I'm tired of being the only one everywhere. So, but thank you so much, and onward, and let's keep these conversations going. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Unmute. Okay.
Okay, so next is Diana Perez. Diana, do you want to jump in?
Good evening, everyone. Madam Mayor, Councilor Linda Glover, is that you? I'm trying to get a good view. And hello, Chief. Councilor Silver, Eric Holmes. And I can't recognize the gentleman on the end there. Hello. My name is Diana Perez, and I'm one of the founders of the Southwest Washington LULAC Council. Happy to be here joining on this listening session that came about. In the heart of what is going on globally, each elected official has a responsibility to be willing to change and do things differently. As you know, you cannot continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. So, is there a place for the City of Vancouver to play a larger role with sensible policy that matters to people and recognizes racism as a public health crisis? To lead with transformative work by dismantling systemic racism outside of forming task forces and committees? For example, the city can declare racism a public health crisis and ask all partners and organizations like the libraries, chambers, CTRAN, to also declare racism as a public health crisis. The time now is for action, and those actions are difficult actions. We must have the hard, uncomfortable discussions around systems set up to keep people from our communities from reaching their full potential. It is not going to be easy work, and it is necessary work. The struggle for economic mobility and in income inequality, you can't address these if you don't address the issue of racism. We need quality change that is meaningful to our communities. Systemic racism is also how we prioritize public investment, how the city prioritizes public investment. In a recent report by the Urban Institute, a comprehensive study of the opportunity zones found that opportunity zones have fallen short on helping low-income communities. Vancouver has 4 opportunity zones: Downtown South Waterfront, Downtown East, 4th Plain Lower Grand, and 4th Plain Kyocera. We would like a report out on how each of these 4 zones are reducing racial inequity and benefiting minority-owned businesses. Now, in light of COVID, the government has clearly failed us. It failed us in language, access, relief, and health. Thank God we jumped into action along with our partners NAACP, LCRG, and Clark County Latino Youth Conference. We raised $500,000 for a community that government placed no value in. Funds were financial relief given loss of jobs, sickness, and an inability to pay rent. The majority of those funds went to people living in Vancouver, families, single parents, elderly who aren't able to pay rent, that lost their job, have underlying health conditions, have children with disabilities, need help buying their insulin, can't afford their medicine for cancer treatment, are fleeing domestic violence, are experiencing homelessness, and more. What does this tell me? This tells me that the city has no clue of the magnitude and intersectionality of the immigrant and Latino population. The people of color are disproportionately impacted in every sense of the word: in emergency response, in physical and mental health services, in education, economic, and social services. We must ensure that a just recovery is here, and it is going to take new courageous policy on your part. Lastly, I urge you to listen to Temple Lent's response to County Councilor Eileen Quering if you haven't already. Temple's response are the words that all elected officials need to echo. Will VPD be removing any blue line decals from the city fleet if they exist? We urge Madam Mayor to request the governor to establish a seat for a citizen representative from Vancouver to sit at the governor's task force on policing. And we are asking for the city to follow through with incorporating body cams. There's a list of what we want. We will share that shortly, but we would like the city to declare racism a public health crisis. We want the city to come up with creative, innovative ways for rent relief or forgiveness for those who do not have a job or are at a poverty level. We want a multicultural leadership center for people power training in civics and culture, and a pipeline to be involved. We want a community police oversight board for both Clark County and VPD with no strings attached to either law enforcement, and it be community driven. We want every candidate running for elected office to make a pledge against racism, to support our dreamers and their families, and to work towards assessing where systemic barriers exist and break them down. We urge the mayor to also speak on our behalf to remove the immunity clause for police. And lastly, we want decisions to be made with us, not for us. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Diana. I think the chief does have a comment on the VPD blue line for you, Diana.
Hi, Diana. So this topic came up last week in conversations, and we have taken actions within the police department to remove any of the thin blue line symbols. We've given direction to our employees that they cannot wear or have any of those type of images on their person, on their uniforms. We had already addressed our cars a couple other times and had never found that type of image to be on our cars. So that we've taken steps late last week and into this week to address that.
Thank you, Chief. Any other thoughts on the other items? Declaring a public crisis, racism a public crisis?
It's something we can discuss. Obviously, there's only 3 people at this table. We can't make commitments to anything like that.
I think we're listening, Diana.
Pardon?
This is meant to be listening and learning. We can't make decisions tonight. We will bring all of our information back to the city council to work on those, so that everyone can hear some of the concerns, questions, and have that big discussion about options, how to fill the gaps and remove the barriers and move forward. So we can't make decisions tonight.
All right, no decisions, but thank you, Ty, for sharing that you would take it back to the council and share it. And if you have any other questions on any other items, be happy to elaborate or discuss further.
Diana, I also appreciate what you brought up about the opportunity zones and doing some of that analysis to see what the actual outcomes are so far. I think it'll be important for us to report back to the council and the community on that, because we did end up, as you noted, establishing 4 of those under the legislation, and I know in some of them nothing has happened, but in others there's been some investment. It'd be good to understand what impact that investment is having. So,
Diana, I did see the governor's list of all of those individuals that he appointed to his task force. I did note that there is no one from Southwest Washington. I'll send him a note.
Thank you.
And also I would say, Diana, you threw out a lot of things very quickly, and so just making sure that, and maybe for anybody who had comments tonight, if you could make sure that those get forwarded on so that.
And we do have that little chat up there at the top. So Diana, before we leave, or anyone, if you put some notes in the chat, we'll go ahead and share all of those notes and get back to you. We'll get some answers to those and keep in touch with you through your emails.
Okay.
Diana, excuse me, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I very much appreciate your comments and your concerns. I just want to make sure that I say for me personally is I like the part where you're saying about we'll have the conversations and we'll work together. I think we're really changing our way of thinking. If you ask us questions and the council comes back and tells you what we think, I don't think that's going to be very helpful in the future. I think this really needs to be a lot of discussion where people of color are giving input to us as we discern and discuss things, because we need a lot of different points of view as we go through the process. Unfortunately, sometimes that slows the process down, but I think we definitely are recognizing that we need more input. Many things we think we understand, and we are finding out we really don't understand. We just don't have that perspective. So I'm inviting you to be part of, your group to be part of the discussions to help us come up with good solutions so that show that we value all of our citizens in our community. Thank you.
Thank you for acknowledging that, Linda.
Is there anyone else on the call that would like to make some comments that hasn't already? I know there's a couple of people that have expressed some interest but have not put anything in the chat box. So this is your opportunity. If you have a comment to make, now's a good time to do it before they run away on us.
We're not running away.
Elizabeth Nahera, did you want to say something? You haven't spoken.
Hi, good evening to everybody. Elizabeth Nahera, Director of Latino Community Resource Group. I have just really taken this time to listen to everybody. I think this is a really great step in the right direction for all of our organizations, the city, chief, everybody who's joining us to bring about issues that, as Diana Avalos and everyone else has brought up, have always been there, but due to the current events, COVID, and now what we're seeing play out with Black Lives Matter, and just all the issues that have come to the forefront, I think that this is just a great opportunity for all of us to come together and continue the conversations. Start the conversations, but not let this be the only time that we come together and voice our comments, and taking the time to learn and listen is very important. I echo LULAC, CCYLC, NAACP, all the organizations that we've been working with. You know, it's been a lot of work coming together and collaborating to raise those funds. As Diana had pointed out, Diana Bettis, to bridge the gap and the needs of our community, the Latin community. And I think that, you know, it's brought about a lot of conversations about many things that we need to begin to look at it a bit more closely. But I'm just happy that, you know, we're getting this started, and I hope that we can continue and make change. And I also echo Chris's fact, you know, of seeing ourselves be more represented. And I thank you all for, you know, letting us have this time to speak. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Eladia, did you have any comments to add?
This is Diana. I just wanted to add one thing to Chris's point on representation within the city. I know that there's effort to hire people of color to certain positions within the city. My concern is that retention and what you can hire them, but you can't keep them. They leave. And they don't leave, I mean, it's our understanding that they leave for other reasons than for better pay somewhere else, or maybe that's the case, but there seems to be a perceived problem with creating a workforce environment for people of color so that they feel included, they're able to share their new and creative ideas, and they're making change. They're agents of change, and you're allowing that to happen, and it's empowerment. So something for you to consider, Eric Holmes, in that workplace culture. throughout the city.
Thanks, Anna. Eulalia?
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to hear our concerns. I guess I'm not as, I don't know, it's just a little frustrating because I've been, since I finished law school, I came back to the community. This is where home is for me. And we've been talking about the same issues year after year after year after year. And conversation is great, but action is better. And I think efforts need to be taken, stronger efforts need to be taken to show the community of color, to show that there is an interest, there is an investment to address our issues. The issues are pretty clear. I mean, we've come together every time to address those issues, but for whatever reason, they're not being addressed. So I would strongly, you know, we're here as a resource for you guys. If the issues are not clear, we're more than happy to meet with you to tell you what the issues are and take steps to address them, not only talk about them, but obviously this is the right step, but I think we need to take a lot more steps to get to our end point. But this is a good beginning. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eulalia. Mayor, I'm not going to ask the question that was asked of Council Leader Quaring yesterday, but I will note that I think that we're all observant, and you especially, Mayor, are fully aware that the same old isn't going to work anymore. It's no longer an opportunity for us to go to the status quo, nor is it an opportunity to go backwards in any fashion. One of the best things about this current time is we've learned what we've learned in a very hard way. And the saddest thing is that we've learned that we weren't prepared for anything. We're not prepared for the city to go down the tubes because of a pandemic. And we're not prepared to answer the call of those that are being persecuted through policing and other actions of that nature. I'm glad we're having this conversation. I'm glad that we're taking the moments to create a scenario where we can all have a voice at the table. But to echo everyone else, the voice only works if we go beyond just this voice. And I promised my council, and I'll promise you as well, that we do a lot of things. I was listening up to somebody today, the amount of things that we're involved in right now. It doesn't mean that we're going to take our eyes off the ball from these two standpoints. We've been talking about this for a couple of years, specifically with the police chief that's currently in position. We just need to make sure that this doesn't become another fashionable statement that we walk away from with regards to policing and city management of any types of funding or anything that go into taking care of those people that live in the city and on the exterior edges of the city. But I want to give my commitment to you guys that whatever we can do to assist you, we will be happy to do. And whatever we can do to provide information, we'll be happy to do. The one thing I'm going to ask in return for that, Mayor, is that sometimes when we're thinking that we should be having an answer, there are no answers forthcoming. And it's only when we participate in these types of conversations that we find out that the things that we're worried about are not necessarily public information. I think that there are opportunities for the city council, there are opportunities for the police force to provide additional transparency in their work that would help. If I'm sitting around thinking, well, what's the police department doing about body cams? And the only thing we keep on hearing is that they cost too much. I think there's a bigger conversation that's going on, but we're just not privy to that. And I think that transparency is what allows us to accept the fact that there is forward motion. We don't expect you guys to solve everything, but we expect you guys to listen and try. And that's all we ask, is that there is a sincere, direct, actionable plan put into place, regardless of whether it makes sense or not. Sometimes the best plans that come out of everything are are plans that didn't make sense to anybody. Otherwise, we wouldn't have light bulbs right now. So if we could all take away that, I think I would be very happy. And I don't know if you, Mayor or Chief, have any questions directly for us, but we'll be happy to answer those at this moment.
Just a couple comments, Ed. We are committed to continuing that conversation. And as the city manager pointed out, we'll have that dashboard of all of those activities and the timeline. And we'll be willing to actually, as Linda pointed out, continue working with you and all of your individuals in our community to put those forward and show with transparency that we're making progress on them. Is LULAC still meeting on once a month on a Thursday night in the back room of the YWCA?
Prior to the stay home and behave order, yes. Currently, we're doing our meetings online. If we reach phase 3 in the middle of July, we'll revisit going back to the YWCA again for those meetings. But if you would like to attend a meeting, any of you, our next meeting, I'll be happy to send the link for the Zoom meeting on that.
Yes, we all would like that opportunity, and so feel free to put that out there for us so that we can attend. We can't have a majority attend, but we'll be there and share with you the progress we're making on these different steps.
We would appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet. Ed, if it's okay, I'll have the city manager give us some closing comments.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks again to everyone. Just building on some of this conversation at the tail end, a through theme that we have heard through every single one of these sessions, this is our 5th one, and we have another one scheduled next week, has been a little less conversation, a little more action, please. We're hopefully the fact that we are having these kinds of conversations. I'm not aware of, in the last more than a decade, of this kind of engagement with the mayor, elected members of the city council, the chief executive, and our chief law enforcement officials sitting down to have this kind of a conversation. I hope that that is evidence of a different kind of commitment from the city. Also, I agree. I tend to be more of an action-oriented person myself, but we want to make sure that we are taking the right action. And I recognize that when you look at those of us sitting around this table, it is 6 white people. And you pointed out that many on the call pointed out earlier in your comment that there is generally only white people in elected positions across all of the agencies in Clark County. So we can take action, but we want to make sure it's the right action, and for us to make sure that it's the right action, we need to listen to you so that we're taking the action that reflects what's needed in the community. So we're looking to balance that, listening, understanding with taking action that is effective and timely. So thank you for that. And also, hopefully, this conversation has illustrated for you that there is a true recognition and understanding of the structural inequities that exist in our society and in our systems and in our community. And that is, once you're aware of that and you start to see it, it can become an overwhelming task to start to change that system. So we're going to hopefully be able to rely on you as a partner to help us understand what to tackle first. I think there's a sense of urgency, particularly around police, and we have some very concrete steps that we can take there, but that's not the end of it. There are other systems that we need to work on, and we hope to do that with you and with other community partners as well. So, and as some of you have heard in earlier, this is not the end, this is the beginning. And we don't know exactly where this is going to go, because as we chart the path, it will be charting it with you and not dictating it to you. And so, again, hopefully we can count on you as co-navigators as we move forward for our community and within the services that we provide in the government. So, really appreciate people's willingness to take time on a Thursday night.
As do we. We appreciate the opportunity to have this later than normal meeting with you guys. I know your other listening sessions were during the early afternoon and early evening, and well, we just don't work that way. So, and you're right. We look for change, and if we want to affect that change, we have to be a part of the conversation. We're committed to doing that. We firmly believe that we need to help narrate the conversation as well. That way our voices are heard as well as yours. And yeah, you're a whole bunch of white folks over there, but as long as you know that we're here and that we count, that's really what we're looking for.
So I think one other point that needs to be mentioned and acknowledged on our part. We didn't provide translation services tonight.
No, we did not.
So we made this
another point of learning.
we made this an inaccessible meeting to many people in the Latino community, and so I acknowledge it and apologize for that, and we have to get better.
We appreciate that. Yeah, it's those little things that we just need to tweak. You're not used to it. We're always expecting it. So middle ground is that we start getting better at it.
Agreed.
I have a final question. Anybody on this council not believe we have systemic racism in Vancouver and Clark County?
We missed the first one.
I don't think any of us should be answering for that specific question. I don't think any of us should be answering for the entirety of the council, and those are conversations I think you need to have with each individual council member.
Well, Councilman Ty Strober, I was not asking as a representative of the council. I was asking as a representative of our community.
I didn't hear the question.
But didn't you say, isn't there anybody on council that doesn't believe?
Yeah, Ed, I don't think we heard the first part of your question.
Anybody sitting in front of us, there are 6 of you.
Oh, I thought you said on council.
Yeah.
No. Looking at us in the eye, do you believe that there's systemic racism in Clark County?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. That's what we wanted to hear. We appreciate it. All right. Soon enough, we're all going to have beverages on you guys. So.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.